The bicycle hummed beneath him, wheels cutting through damp gravel. A breath of wind pressed against his cheeks, cool and sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth. The fields glistened faintly under the shimmer of a Scandinavian summer dawn. The sky was pale, in that special not yet day but no longer night. He leaned into the turn of the road. Then, ahead, he couldn't believe his eyes. His legs slowed, pedals heavy, until the bicycle came to a stop. Clumsily, he set the bike against the grass and stepped away from it. The wet ground pulled at his shoes as he moved forward. The light ahead seemed not to shine, but to inhabit the air itself. Within it stood a shape, massive and curved, like two great plates pressed together, bright enough to force his eyes to narrow. But it was more than a craft because he was not alone. It was very early in the morning, around 4:30, when the 15-year-old boy set out on his bicycle to reach his summer job at a gardening company in the town of Broby. About 15 minutes later, as he turned a corner, he noticed a bright light about 50 to 60 meters out in a field. He stopped, got off his bicycle, and walked toward the glowing object, trying his best to figure out what it could be. When he came within 10 to 15 meters of the UFO, he saw 5 figures. They looked human in form, but they stood no taller than 60 centimeters, with large heads, large chests, and very small hips and legs. 4 of them were moving around the UFO, gathering samples with one hand while holding a bag or something like it in the other. They appeared to be walking across the tops of the grass. The 5th ufonaut was standing still, watching the others, but suddenly turned and caught sight of the observer. All 5 immediately ran into the UFO, disappearing into the hatch. The craft lifted off with a humming or rushing sound. At the same time, the brightness increased so strongly that the boy was forced to cover his eyes with his arms. According to the boy, the UFO disappeared beyond some power lines and continued in the direction of Odense. Once the craft was gone, the boy noted that the grass where the craft had stood was pressed down, but aside from that, there were no visible traces. The boy got back on his bike and resumed the trip to his workplace, where he told his employer about what he had seen. The employer, however, brushed it aside with the remark that the boy was probably not fully awake yet. After that, the boy kept the experience to himself until he finally had the chance to relate it at a lecture organized by FUFOS, the Association for the Study of Flying Saucers. The lecturer asked him to complete a questionnaire, and FUFOS then passed the case on to SUFOI, Scandinavian UFO Information, which was the main Danish UFO research group. The Aubenrå UFO study group took over the case in March 1983 and set up a visit with the observer for the 1st of May. One of the central investigators was Inge Svan, who together with 3 colleagues made the journey to meet him. The observer recounted the incident without any significant deviations from what had previously been reported. There was, however, some uncertainty about the points of the compass, which we will get back to. Another small deviation that surfaced was the fact that in the first completed report form, it had been stated that the grass was scorched after the UFO's presence. The boy now claimed that this had been written down wrong, insisting it was only pressed down and perhaps had looked a little darker. The investigators noted the change, uncertain whether the mistake lay with the note-taker or with the boy himself. He explained that the field had been covered in ryegrass, with seed heads lying down in a thick mat about 35 to 40 centimeters high. It was at that level, on top of the grass, that the ufonauts had been moving. After the interview in the observer's home, the investigators drove out to the observation site. In the field, grain had now been sown, which had grown to about 30 centimeters in height. The boy was able to point out the spot immediately. He was certain of the location because he had noticed a water post just outside the place in the field where the UFO had stood. Following the observer's directions, they measured various distances. The distance from the road to the UFO's position was 52 meters. The closest distance the observer himself had come to the UFO was 12 meters. From that point, the investigators asked him to indicate how large a circle 3 of them should form to mark the size of the craft. He told them to stop when the circle measured 9 meters in circumference, corresponding to 2.86 meters in diameter. The size of the UFOnauts was measured at 60 centimeters. From about 12 meters away, the witness signaled when the height was right, while one of the investigators moved his hand upward along his legs from the ground. The direction in which the object had disappeared was measured as 180 degrees south on the compass. The landing site itself provided no further information, since there were no visible traces. The field had been plowed in the autumn, and later grain had been sown. After completing the site investigation, the group returned with the observer, who filled out another questionnaire. This, however, provided no new information. The young man then had to leave for work, and his parents offered the investigators coffee. This gave them the chance to hear the parents' view on the date of the observation, which the boy himself could not recall. The parents believed the incident must have taken place between the 15th and the 25th of July 1982, as a heat wave had begun during those days. It was for that reason they explained that their son had to start work so early in the morning, since by midday it was far too hot to work in the greenhouses. The parents fully supported their son's account. They emphasized that he was not the type to seek attention, and that he was not given to daydreams or fantasies. With that, the investigations were concluded for the time being, and the team returned to southern Jutland. From there, they contacted the Meteorological Institute and requested the weather report for July 1982. The report showed that between the 15th and the 25th of July, there had been only one day with rain early in the morning, the 16th of July. All the other days showed fine weather. In the hope of finding further witnesses, the investigators wrote to the chief of police in Odense to ask whether any reports had been received during that period that might correspond to a UFO sighting. The reply was brief. No such reports had been registered. Since quite some time had already passed, and the exact date was uncertain, they decided against contacting the newspapers or the airport at Beldringe near Odense. They would, however, have liked to obtain the name of the employer to whom the observer had spoken immediately after the incident. The boy was unwilling to provide this, explaining that he did not believe any useful information could be gained by contacting him. Within the group, the case gave rise to many discussions. An additional witness or even a photograph taken the following day to document possible landing marks would, of course, have been very valuable. The observer himself appeared to the investigators as an open and honest person. He described the incident directly and without hesitation. His answers came promptly and without significant variation from one telling to the next. Their impression was that he was unusually mature for his age. Despite being only 15, he did hard work for local farmers and spent much of his free time in the company of adults. He was also attending a continuation school on a daily basis. These impressions were confirmed by his parents. The boy had no prior knowledge of UFOs worth mentioning, and had even said that the subject did not interest him. In their deliberations, the investigators highlighted several factors that spoke against accepting the report as a genuine close encounter of the third kind. The first issue concerned the condition of the grass at the site. In the earliest report, it was said to have been scorched, but in later accounts it was described only as pressed down. The observer himself rejected the scorched grass version as incorrect. Another point of concern was the uncertainty about the date. The boy could not even say whether the event had taken place in June or July, and admitted that he did not know why. Only with the help of his parents was the time frame narrowed down to between the 15th and the 25th of July 1982. The most troubling detail was his reluctance to allow the investigators to contact his employer. He did not forbid it outright, but repeatedly insisted that it would be of no use. The investigators acknowledged that there might be reasonable grounds for not involving the employer, but the motive was never fully clarified. Taken together, these weaknesses meant that the case remained only the testimony of a single observer, and so it could not be confirmed. At the same time, there was nothing that disproved it either. The investigators placed weight on their positive impression of the boy's character and the lack of any apparent motive for him to have invented the story. Their conclusion was that the incident could not be explained on the basis of the available information. The website, hiddenmark.dk, that is dedicated to documenting and analyzing classic UFO encounters in Scandinavia, has pointed out that it was raining on the morning of the observation, suggesting the possibility of a thunderstorm and a larger electrical event. Since such factors are known to influence human perception, this is not an unimportant detail. They also highlight the strange sound reported when the UFO took off, which could indicate that some external phenomenon affecting the senses was involved. You'll find a link to the site in the episode's description. Cases like the one in Broby have often been explained in cultural or historical terms, but that does not make them easier to dismiss. You can call them stories, even folklore, but they keep appearing, told by people with little to gain and much to lose. Across different sources, information will always vary in reliability, sometimes even contradicting itself. But among the many accounts, we should stay attentive to the questions they raise. Where are the small glints of insight that might deepen our sense of the universe and our place in it? Could this case be one of them? As always here on Stories Lost, we'll let you be the judge. And just a quick reminder, guys and girls, if you appreciate our content, make sure to drop a like on the video, share it with others who are into this kind of thing, and of course subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming up next. Stay safe and stay curious. See you in the next. Thanks for the coffee and supers. And thanks to our highly valued ongoing supporters.